Okay, so my video shut off because I ran out. This is like 30 seconds later. I was explaining how no matter, this is your point of aim, this is your crosshairs right here, and you can be, you might sight in 7 inches high because you're going to have shots at 1,000 yards. You might sight in dead center and dial to 7 inches to get your long shots. Obviously 1,000 yards can be more than 7 inches, it can be 12 or 14 inches depending on what you're shooting, but 9, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. But let's say you're sighted in 650 yards and you want to set up here. Cant is no more or less, even if your point of impact and your point of aim are widely separated, that does not increase the cant. And as I said, when I'm down shooting for effect to test these guns on my target, I will shoot a group here, 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 here. And cant has exactly the same effect on any one of these groups. And all it does is it moves the point of impact side to side. That's it. So it's important. I don't do this on a bench rest gun because I try to just hold it flat and we can't afford the weight. But on any hunting guns that I use, I have a level on them because cant, the line of sight stays straight, and when you cant the gun, it pivots around that point. Generally, the sight path and the bullet's path intersect somewhere between 22 and 50 yards. You're looking here, the bullet originates down here, it comes up and it crosses your line of sight somewhere about 40 yards out. So if you pivot around that point, when you're canting the gun, what you're in effect doing is swinging the gun outward back here. Let me try it this way. If this is that point where your bullet comes up and intersects your line of sight, when you cant the gun, you're in effect swinging the gun one way or the other, and you're still looking down the line of sight, but your bullet comes up and it originates off to the side, so it comes up through the line of sight, only it misses. And it comes up a little to the side and it crosses over the line of sight. Because if you model it, it hinges on that spot where the path of the bullet crosses the line of sight. And again, I don't know if this is being clear. In some cases you guys are going to need to draw pictures. But if you go out and test it, use the old engineer's trick. Harold Vaughn taught me this years ago. The old engineer's trick is quite simply exacerbate the problems. Shoot an AR-15 with wide separation, purposely cant the gun, and watch your groups just walk back and forth. You cant your gun to the right, the gun in effect moves over here, so it crosses over and it hits cant clockwise, it hits to the right. I'm doing this backwards for you guys, but okay. Cant clockwise. I won't say trust me because I don't want you to ever trust me. I want you to think. I want you to think and model and think and go try stuff and understand. Cant's not hard to figure out. But cant has an effect regardless of scope separation and regardless of how you're sighted in. There are people that say, well, I sight in at 100 yards or I sight in at 600 yards because that, let's say they think they're going to take 600 yard shots, so they'll sight in at 600 yards thinking that that somehow eliminates cant at 600 yards or the effect of cant at 600 yards. And that's BS. Cant happens regardless of separation between line of sight and line of trajectory, and cant happens regardless of where you're sighted in and the distance between your point of impact and your point of sighting, even if you're set. So just understand that you can't account for or you can't eliminate cant by changing your configuration or by sighting in at different distances. It's always the same. A given separation between scope and boreline at a given distance will result in a given dispersion due to canting. Now, change the relationship of the bore line to the scope line, and it changes that cant just a little bit. It shrinks it up, it shortens it up. increase the distance, the cant gets worse because the separations are more exaggerated. The tiniest tilt here knocks that scope over a long ways. But in any case, there's no curvature or weirdness going on in the trajectory. Wherever that barrel is pointed, a bullet just leaves it, and the second it leaves, the millisecond, the microsecond it leaves, it starts to fall to the earth. It doesn't matter if it's angled up, it's still going to fall X amount. On my model where I have the hanging target and I shot up into the corner of the room, I could just as well have shot that dead flat and it dropped down and hit the target. This little bit of difference back here does not change. The bullet never rises. But that's another thing that we might, if I can figure out a way to model it, I might talk about it. I don't know that I can. I don't know that I will. I just want to say that cant occurs regardless of all of these things people think they can dial it out. The simple fact is that if you're going to shoot long distance, you must have a level on your system. And you must learn how to set your scope directly above your bore. And you must learn how to plumb your crosshairs so that they intersect. Again, we've got a situation where with a level in place, if this is the center line of the bore, and this is the center line of the scope, and this is the center line of the trajectory, they must all be lined up. Now at long distances, you're going to run into something that is commonly called all kinds of absolute BS terms, but in reality, gravity drop makes the bullet fall through the air. It remains pointed stably, but as it's falling through the air, that generates a wind on its belly. Falling generates a wind. The bullet then has to cant into the wind, and it has to cant off center, so its tail drag drags it offline. It's a drift function that occurs, you start to see it at about 600 yards, and by 1,000 it's up to almost 10 inches, and it just gets incrementally worse. But as the bullet is falling through the air, it's experiencing a wind on its belly, regardless of the winds other than that. And that wind on its belly sets up its attitude such that its tail drags it. It's commonly called spindrift. And it would happen in dead still air, and it's a deceleration function. The bullet balances on the wind that it sees, which is the belly wind, so it has to adjust. And when it does that, it kicks its tail off a little bit. It's the same function that, I'm just going to throw this in here because a bench rest guy knows that this is true. The rest of you won't. If there's a wind coming from this direction and it's in effect blowing your bullets off, they blow off and they go up. And if the wind is coming from this direction, these bullets that are they're actually not being blown off, but your groups will form with a dead side wind. The groups to the right of center will form downward, and the groups to the left of center will actually lift upward. And that's because, in response to that wind, the bullet's tail actually picks up and over, and it sucks it. It's got all these wind vectors coming in on it, and the resultant effect is that when it gets pushed over here, this wind pushes, the bullet balances on that wind, and when it does that, its angle of repose also picks its tail up a little bit. So not only does it get dragged this way, trying to balance on that right-hand wind, but it also has its tail picked up a little bit due to angle of repose, so that sucks it up in the air just a little bit. It doesn't actually suck it up, it just slows down its gravity drop. But trust me, this is how groups form on the target, and this is why they form that way. You won't get that from any ballistics text. There is nobody out there. I've had this argument with two of the ballisticians, and they come up with all kinds of crap like ballistic jump and just pure bullshit. In simple fact, any wind vector on this bullet steers it. It doesn't blow it over, but it steers it. So in the long term, over the long haul, as the bullet's falling through the air, it gets this wind on its belly that causes it to do exactly the same thing. Just like a crosswind here will push it over and down, that same crosswind here is pushing up, and it causes it to drift to the right because it causes it to drag its tail to the right. So a right hand twist, again, this is all predicated on right hand twist. Right hand twist, long range shots, something called spin drift, will cause your bullets to incrementally drag to the right. That's way beyond the purview of this canting video, but just let me say that canting is a problem all the way through the spectrum. Where you mount your scope and how fast your gun shoots have an effect on it, but you can't cancel it. And where you sight in on your, whether you sight in above your point of aim, when I say sight in, that's bullet impact, or identical or below, or however you want to do it, has zero effect, none on the canting effect. Canting happens down here zeroed out or up here above zero. So hopefully my visualization helps somebody. If it doesn't, then oh well, I threw it out there. Doesn't change the fact that it's real and that it's fact and that that is the effects of cant and spindrift in the real world.